I am, there we go, live stream got it. Are we up? There we go.
Almost. Very, very close.
All right.
Everybody needs to go.
So we got needs that one. Yep. Fantastic.
Taking longer than normal today. Here we go.
There we are. Excellent. So for YouTube posterity, I am Joshua O'Shea. I have no official role here in the church, so that means I can do whatever I want. I acolyte, I've done this adult formation stuff, I've done a little bit with high school, Sunday school a while back. I am a librarian. I'm the young adult librarian at the Glen Ellen Public Library. And it's like so my position at my library, everything's a little bit different everywhere, but it's almost like a 60-40 split between being specifically young adult services and then reference services. And it just kind of depends on the year or the time of year or how short-staffed our department is, which one is 60 and which one is 40. Just, kind of general reference or young adult specifics. I have been Christian all my life. I have a large family. We grew up kind of pan-Baptist, but my parents never really identified with a particular religious tradition. My mom grew up Wisconsin Synod Lutheran, and we grew up with Luther's smaller catechism, but there was always heavy emphasis on scripture reading, personal relationship with Jesus. My dad did not grow up Christian, didn't grow up religious, and it was he had a lot of negative interactions with Christian leaders of various traditions, and so a lot of it was he and my mom's influence on him that kind of brought him to that. I was baptized a Lutheran, and then at the baptism, when they were going through the profession of faith, is when my parents said, "Oh, we don't believe that." So we left and grew up in various Baptist traditions. Again, a heavy emphasis on personal relationship with Jesus and scripture reading. I went to undergrad, and I've always been kind of a heavy overthinker and took classes in Christian history and Christian theology, got into specific philosophies, discovered patristics, a lot more early church stuff. I took a class distinctively on Luther, the Lutheran tradition, Reformation, and a lot of things grew from that. So I've always loved, I wouldn't say it when I was a kid like this because I didn't know the words. I've always loved ritual. I've always been attracted to the concepts of transcendency and having a moment outside of time. So I've always been attracted to a lot of that. And I've always been a history nerd. I was homeschooled all the way through, so I could get my core stuff done and then supplement it with whatever I wanted. So a lot of that was already church history reading when I was like in 7th grade. So this is
like all the other guys in the block.
Yeah, right, yeah.
What do you think about Irenaeus? Oh.
Yeah. Were we talking Lewis's interpretation or yeah. So never really ask a theologian what they think about Lewis or about Christian contemporary praise music, because we are jerks about it. Yeah, so I wanted to jump into this. This is fun. So I've done prayer book stuff before, so that'll be second. Depending on what time we get to, I actually revised my old slideshow with some more fun stuff. And just like before, break in, roll your eyes at me. You're already the peanut gallery, so we're already there. We'll just jump into it.
Can I ask someone near the computer to poke the it's okay to live stream this
We've got
though?
that.
Oh, you guys are brilliant. Sorry.
Yeah. Yep. So I was very proud of myself I have 2 triplets, right? So Trinitarian and the 2 natures of Christ. Look at me. I did this because this is a theme that I see a lot. We read this in the handbook. We kind of have these themes going through, and these are a lot of themes that I've also picked up. We had a three-legged stool, which is kind of Wesleyan scripture, reason, and tradition. That's very central to Anglican Episcopal identity and Wesleyan and Methodist identity, for that matter. Because those two guys, even though they kind of split off and started different traditions, I think they both died Anglicans.
I know them. I
Yeah.
know, I know Charles did?
Yeah.
Or I don't know which
Yeah,
one. I
they,
know, yeah.
well, you know, of course, in their day, the Church of England was pretty rationalistic and dry, so
Yeah,
they kind of fired things up a little bit.
yep.
Still felt in the Anglican communion.
Yeah, they wrote a lot of our. Do we have a lot of their songs?
Yeah.
In our, yeah. I know even in my Baptist hymnal there were Charles Wesley songs. So that Great Awakening. Another one is Eucharist Bishop Church, and just like a lot of Protestants, history or theology nerds, I am infatuated with the Eastern Orthodoxy theology. And this is a seminal book by, I think he's still alive, but a pretty big, but of course his name's gonna slip my, Psycheliosis, where it's not Losky, Zizialis, a guy named Zizialis, or I think he's Russian Orthodox. But this is the structure, it's kind of the history and theology together. The Eucharist Bishop Church. So if you ask, what is the church? He might argue it's the Eucharist, it's the bishop, and that is what makes the church. And then we have our threefold offices: deacon, priest, and bishop. These are central kind of organization and functionality of the established church. Second triplet, Holy Catholic and Apostolic. So, you know, we say this in our creed. We do argue that we're Catholic in some ways. We will not. We'll say, yeah, Roman without the Pope. Some high church Episcopalians might argue.
There's big C Catholic and little C.
Sure.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
you can always say.
That's
little
another
C
way.
Catholic.
That's another way to do it too. Yep. Unless you're French, they put everything lowercase. So the apostolic succession, we claim that through our bishops. There are different ways to claim it. There's the straight, you know, hands on head, hands on head, hands on head, hands on head, hands on head. But then other people might say, well, you also have to have a particular content to your teaching. What is the teaching of the apostles, the breaking of bread, you know, those kind of the terms that St. Paul uses. And that's always been very important to Anglican Episcopal identity. I mean, right? Episkopoi from the Greek is the Greek term for bishop, and so it's like it's built into the name. These are going to be. I'm probably going to have a lag between my slide movements. Our sacraments: Eucharist, baptism, +5. So this is a fudged triplet. +5. You know, the two, Calvin would say, and I can't believe I'm citing him in a non-derogatory way, but he say that the sacraments are, I'm paraphrasing him, they're required of us, but they're optional from God. And then the two kind of biblical ones, and Luther kind of did this too. He focused on the Eucharist and baptism, and then said the other stuff is fine. Go ahead and do it.
I didn't think Calvin thought anything was optional.
Right?
A lot is forbidden.
Yes, a
Yeah.
lot is forbidden.
Forbidden or required, I guess.
And-
I kinda
right.
thought.
And he was literally restructuring a state society. Like he was rebuilding Geneva as like a dictator. And that's, so he used a lot of his theology to support himself, and then he used a lot of his field study of sometimes you got to kill a few peasants to write theology. So there's some problems in that. Luther said that sometimes you got to kill a few peasants. So that's not great. So and another kind of, this is really distinctive for us also, low, high, and broad. So low church, high church, broad church. We won't get into it in this series, but one of my new points of interest is seeing how stripped down some churches are in some liturgies, where clergy won't even won't even wear vestments in some places.
We talked about that a little bit last
Did
week.
you? Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, high smells and bells. We're kind of like a broad high church here.
Mhm.
Some people argue that that this has theological connotations, like if you're broad, you really don't have any convictions. If you're high, your head's in the clouds with your theology of Jesus or the Trinity, or you're so heavenly minded you're no earthly good. And like low church is like, let's demythologize scripture, and there's no spirituality. So those are the characteristics that you could interpret those as.
Well, a nicer way to say, like, I mean, of course you could praise all of them too,
Yeah,
and
yep,
I mean,
yep.
broad is like, that just makes me think the Episcopal Church welcomes you. And
Yep,
so
absolutely.
embracing.
Yep.
Which is nice. So.
Yeah. It's weird how I could solidify some of my thoughts when like I play devil's advocate against myself. So I'm like, okay, so you really think this? And I'm like, yeah, that is what I think. Okay.
But then your other side comes up and says, no, you don't. You think
No, you
this.
don't.
And
Yeah.
As long as there's not a third.
Uh-oh, we're the middle way, so that's a problem.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
I'm like, call in the shrinks.
Right. Yeah. All right, so I clicked my button. Let's see if my computer will keep up with me, or if it's going to jump twice. Okay. What is the Anglican Communion? Because that's the chapter of this book here, or the chapter that we're in. So I'm using different sources than the handbook, because that's kind of more fun for me to do for supplements. So it's a fellowship of 42 national, pan-national, regional, independent, yet interdependent churches over 165 countries. Somebody kind of snarkily put it as the Anglican Communion is the child of the Mother Church of England and the father state government of England, which has some truth to it, because as the British Empire spreads, thus did the Church of England. Again, here are the two kind of poles you could argue. It's a beautiful complexity, or it's a big sloppy mess. This was great for me too, because I did a lot of learning in polity and how these things were related to each other. So come on, little guy.
And one of the interesting things to me about that is, like this past summer, Lambeth met.
Mm-hmm.
And Lambeth is a conference that happens about every 10 years, although the pandemic changed when it happened.
Yeah.
But it's like a conference in England of all the bishops from all the different Anglican churches worldwide.
Right,
Yeah.
the active bishops.
The active bishops.
Okay.
Right. So for instance, some of you know about Bishop Todd McGregor and Patsy McGregor, who were missionaries in Madagascar, and that I'm pretty involved with. And when they retired from being missionaries, Todd is still a bishop forever, but he isn't an active bishop, so he was not invited to Lambeth.
Yeah.
He went and hung out anyway.
He went
Right.
and hung out with some people he wanted to see there, but he wasn't part, but you have to be an active bishop. But what is interesting to me about this is all of these break-off Anglican churches that we have around here
Mm-hmm.
were not invited because
Right.
they are not part of the Anglican communion. They're not recognized by the Archbishop of Canterbury.
Yeah.
So
So they originally hoped that we would get kicked out.
Sure.
right.
Then they would be the Anglican Church of America.
Like push us out and pull in ACNA,
Yeah.
or
Whatever they were.
I don't even think like ACC, which was a group I was involved in for a while. lot of my formation on the high church stuff came from them, and they didn't care one way or the other
Mhm.
about the Anglican communion. They broke off in like the 60s era,
Mhm.
the affirmation of St. Louis. Yeah,
Question.
yeah, good.
So how do these Anglican churches
Mhm.
around here
Mhm.
view like us, like this church?
Apostate. Hellbound.
Huh.
I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but they obviously think there's something really wrong with us, that they have to start a new Anglican.
So
Did they, but which came first, us or them?
Oh,
We
we've
did.
been around forever.
we did.
Yeah.
So for instance, in 2003, when Gene Robinson was installed as Bishop of New Hampshire and he was gay, over 100 people left St. Mark's and they formed a new Anglican church, All Souls, in Wheaton.
But I feel like we had an Anglican church in Naperville
Yeah, I think there's a couple
Or-
down there.
years.
Yeah, it was after the Episcopal Church allowed women to serve.
So,
Okay, I
yeah,
can't
yeah.
remember, but I can visualize the building,
Mhm.
and that building has been there forever. It's just down the street from the post office.
There were
Oh,
Anglican
yeah.
there were Anglican churches that separated before 2003, like Laura said, on the issue of women
When did
in the
women
church.
become?
1979, I think it was,
Okay.
the first women were ordained in the US.
Okay.
And Britain still didn't at that time. So like when we were living in Oxford, there were women who were hoping that the Church of England would allow women.
They're already deacons,
There
just
were
waiting for
deacons,
the
but
word.
not, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess in my head, I feel like totally wrong, I think. And I had a conversation with myself later
Uh-huh.
about this. But I feel like the Anglican came first, so I feel like the Episcopal would have come next. But now I'm
Nope. it's the other way around.
realizing,
Well, the
Well,
Anglican
no,
England
yeah.
came first.
see, that's where I'm
But the
confused.
churches in the United States that have called themselves Anglican came after the Episcopal Church. But then there's also an Anglican Church of Canada. You know,
Right.
but when the founding, I mean, basically the Episcopal Church happened kind of simultaneously with the founding of America, you know, with
And those are all Church of England parishes in America, and that became the Episcopal Church.
Right, yeah, because we were in Williamsburg with a friend of
Yeah,
ours who's
Bruton
a priest in a church.
Bruton Parish. The one in, the church that's right in Williamsburg, in Old Williamsburg.
She was at Grace
Oh.
Okay.
as assistant, and now she's like 45 minutes away. But that church that she was at, there were people, members of the congregation who signed the Declaration of Independence,
Right.
who are buried in the cemetery of that
And the
church.
church
Yeah.
ground.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Who's in heaven?
Well,
So-
only us, unfortunately.
Right, that's it. Nobody else.
okay, so,
I was raised that way. The only people in heaven are people with independent fundamental Bible churches.
So like Josh mentioned an Anglican group that he was involved with that's formed in the 60s, right? So there've been like breakaway groups from the Episcopal Church.
Typically, seeing as their argument would be the Episcopal Church becoming too liberal, moving away from
Mhm.
biblical authority, things like that.
okay,
Where I would argue it's more honest biblical studies, it's more robust theology, it's more authentic understanding of how religions form and grow and understand themselves.
Constitutional law.
Sure. So
Like
we've got
not-
canon law.
Another big Anglican church in Wheaton that's very active is Church of the Resurrection, and that was because of women, wasn't it?
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that formed, so that's been around a lot longer,
That was
They have
originally
women
an
now.
actual Episcopal church in West Chicago. And then
right?
they became independent, didn't even have a bishop for a while. They started ordaining one another priests, and it got kind of sloppy, but then they got pulled into one of these big groups.
Well, it was wasn't it kind of a breakoff from that church, because didn't the Episcopal Church stay there?
The Episcopal, there's a little one, little
Yeah,
church, they
yeah.
stayed there. Church of the Resurrection are very large.
Right.
But they're a large active church.
Do they have women now?
I know
wonder
that
if
there's
they've
a
all,
fracture
you know, it's
right
like,
I
now.
don't
we're not
bel-
doing
I-
this in
I don't believe they
1989, but
do.
they'll definitely do it now.
I wish Ashley and Kevin were here today,
Yeah,
because they
yeah.
went there and they could.
They had for a while at least one deaconess. But then she and her husband, who was an active priest, went to form another.
Oh, was that Kevin and
Yeah.
somebody? Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
There's also
Yeah.
we lost a lot of people after we started revising the 1928 prayer book too.
mm-hmm,
They liked that's a much more penitential theme in that
Yeah.
service, and they felt we should have that. And they felt we were going, too light.
When we
Yeah.
started going to the Episcopal Church in 1981, we were soon, after we mentioned this last week, we were soon after that asked to become licensed lay readers, which was a course that you had to go through. It was like a 12-week course and read books and so forth, and take tests. And I was asked to do that, and David, and Lucy Shaw, who some of you may know, she's a Christian poet, was at the church, and she was asked to do it. And we found out later that there were people who left the church because Lucy and I became licensed lay readers, which is nothing like being a deacon or a priest.
no, it's not.
And yet that was
Yep.
so disturbing to some people
Yep.
that they left the church because of
It's
that.
kind of good that they left, right? Because
Well, that's sometimes
Well,
how it feels. I
I
don't
know,
know,
but
man.
I mean,
It,
the
yeah,
church we went to, they came up with
Yep.
this saying or a mission
Yeah.
statement or something, and it was Jesus accepts all to his table, and so do we.
Mhm.
So when these people aren't accepting, and say the Episcopal Church is all accepting, but yet all of these splinter groups are because we don't accept someone?
Right.
yeah,
Well, they don't accept them in a certain role.
Right.
yeah.
Well, they don't,
Well, that's
That's
true.
true.
That
Women are
is
always
a-
welcome. I mean, who's gonna run everything, right? But when it comes to preaching and stuff, and I saw something this week that a lot of people have no trouble with the gospel being preached by a cartoon tomato, but not a real life woman.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Well, how about the Pope, this week saying that it's not bad to be gay?
Oh, I didn't know
Really
that they
said-
said that.
Yeah.
Well,
Kind of said something like that, what, a year and a half ago
Yeah.
on the plane?
Who am I to
With
judge?
something,
Yeah.
yeah, so
Right.
was he a little more clear this week?
Yes.
He said, who am I to judge?
Oh,
On the
okay.
plane with the press conference?
but this week, it definitely came out, it was
Wow.
pretty clear, the stance was accepting.
That's cool, but he
It's-
keeps telling the German church that we're not gonna accept, we're not gonna bless same-sex marriages,
I think he's accepting as an individual, but maybe
Yeah.
not in his role as Pope.
What he
right?
said
Yeah.
was, homosexuality is not a crime, but it's a sin.
Oh,
So I don't
Yeah.
think he's
Well,
accepting of
No.
homosexuality.
Well, yeah, right, so what is accepting? Is
Yeah,
it
what would you
saying, you're welcome here, but you can't live the person that you are, right? And actually, we're gonna get to that.
Yeah, wow. Wow.
Yeah, so let's put a pause on that. I
Come
wanna
on
go
in,
back.
shut up.
Pretty much. So, but before we get back to the slide, I want to say something about that church building. Church property and the ownership of church property has been almost as an intense battle as as a congregation leaving. So it's possible, although most lawsuits have sided with the Episcopal Church, that the building you're talking about was not only a group of people, but the building moved out of the jurisdiction of the Episcopal Church into one of the new Anglican like the conservative Anglican provinces. So if you do go back to that church and say, look, it says right there, 18, what is with that? So that's possible. But when it comes to real estate, the Episcopal Church has been very legally successful in keeping a lot of our real
Here's
estate.
something you may not know. in the time we've been here, there was a former rector who, didn't make a big announcement about this, but he was meeting with the bishop, trying to pull St. Mark's out of the Episcopal Church.
Yeah,
And he was very offended that the bishop showed up with the lawyer.
yeah, the chancellors, okay.
And
Yep.
This rector, let's call him Chip, I mean, he seriously, he was trying to get St. Mark's pulled out of the Episcopal Church.
Yeah.
It's interesting because our founding,
Including the building.
building and everything,
Right.
yeah,
Ah,
Why?
because of women and
Because of Gene Robinson.
And it turns out that our original Constitution says that we will be an Episcopal church. So
Yeah.
what
So-
says that?
there's a Constitution when you incorporate as a church.
So what I got up here, we got lots of provinces, member churches. Each has its own system of governance. We don't use the term archbishops, which I think is a loss. The Episcopal Church doesn't use the term archbishop.
Why? Why do you think it's a law?
Why do I? Because I think it's cool. I want the smells and white. Oh, you're the temporary elected presiding bishop of the General Conference of the Episcopal Church. That sounds way too corporate. Give me archbishop. Prince of the church.
When I was a kid, we thought it was because of the shape of their head.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, that makes sense.
Yep. There's no formal constitution or international church law. It's a shared heritage, ways of worshiping and relationships, the bonds of affection between members worldwide. Right now, these bonds of affection feel really one-handed. I'll shake with one and I'll kind of come back, I'll punch you with the other one. That's how it feels. And that's what we see at Lambeth. That's what we see in any sort of case where people like sit down, like try to have discussions about what the global South is thinks about the Church of England considering blessing same-sex unions. It's not terribly affectionate right now.
It's interesting that one issue, homosexuality, destroys denominations. They split over it. The Methodists are doing it, the Presbyterians are doing it, the Lutherans are doing it.
Yeah.
And it's happened to us.
Yeah. It seems like there's something very deep in our species that has a very, I would argue, irrational phobia about it, right? It's like, why? We'll say, well, it's what the Bible says. Yeah, but you can ignore half this other stuff. Why is it this that seems, it's just too much in your face? Is it
Second
just
Amendment.
too clear?
I'll listen to you if you can tell me the 14th.
Yeah, yeah. Ours was based on original canon law. There's some canon law that's even older. In 2002, in Hong Kong, there was a constitutive council that came up with the principles of canon law. I think it'd be really interesting to read that now, since it's so. There's one that did come out in Lambeth in 2022, and that's the one that people have been arguing over. How does it actually apply? Does it actually say anything different? Some people are like, oh, it's very important, it's very different. And other people are like, nope, waste of time. That was a waste of 10 days. And lag. Dope.
It
Wow,
gives us
bad
time to
lag.
ponder. That's okay.
Yeah, I should press it when I start talking. And then it'll move over. Come on, little guy. There we go. So these are the common principles that are typically laid out in official documents. But again, there's church property down there, right? So that'll probably have some kind of condition about how either property is acquired, maintained, and if disputes arise, general suggestions for how to resolve disputes, but that'll all be relegated to the local, to the parish church. Hey, that went quick, and I forgot to put something there. All right, so I'm going to go to this Church of England because I got some news about it that I think is a great case study. Church of England is not the Anglican Communion. It is a part of it. We've got a list of members of the Anglican Communion somewhere in this chapter. The
Page
church,
199.
yeah, 199. The Church of England is not an official legal director of the Anglican Communion. It may have been a while ago, back when Britain was still an empire, but there's been a lot of post-colonialism that's actually been listened to and applied to church governing law and policy. I would argue the Church of England is often a tone setter for the Anglican Communion. It's kind of like an unofficial reverence thing, like that is the mother.
And yet, in some ways, I could argue that the Episcopal Church has set the tone in ways more than, like,
Sure.
like it has led the way for women in ministry
Yeah.
and for gays, and, you know.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
like, yes and no.
Sure. Yeah. And some people could argue that the tone that the Church of England has set for the Anglican Communion has been incredibly wimpy. Some people say that, like Justin Webley, who was the last Canterbury bishop, or even Rowan Williams, who was before him, and I really like Williams. I love his theology writing. Some people say, oh, they did a great job still keeping us together when we're like, you know, siblings and rivalry. And other people like, they just kicked the can. They didn't actually solve anything. Are they supposed to? They're not the actual Anglican Communion dictators.
Right, and that's what I was just gonna say, but you said they're not the ones in charge.
Mhm. Yep.
And if kicking the can gives people more time to think and process and let time pass where
Mhm.
maybe people can come around to
Mhm.
something,
Mhm.
then maybe kicking the can
Is what we need,
is not a bad thing.
right?
We're very, it seems like we want solutions and answers and resolution like that.
Yeah.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe that's not,
That's
way
too
it's gonna
fast at
go.
some points, right?
yeah.
You could say, well, is there a time when a decision should be made? Is that what these conferences are for? But over somebody's tenure, you know, maybe something is appropriate over somebody's tenure, where, like what you're saying, we need time to talk and to digest and reflect. But then if you have a conference, it's like we act like, if the member churches are all saying, we all want a decision, and there's one person who has kind of, or one group that has stalled a decision, you say, why do you get to stall this? This is supposed to be a communion where bishop, you know, stuff like, so it's totally valid. I'm not convinced I'm right.
I don't even know which side you're on, really. I'm so, like,
That's
I'm
okay.
trying to.
I don't know either. Part
Yeah.
of me is
Talk
like,
yourself.
part of me is like the Anglican Communion keep itself. We want to be part of it if it's there, but we're not going to count out anybody. We're not going to take direction. So with the Church of England, or Anglicanism in the Church of England stands on marriage. This just happened last week. The Church of England will bless same-sex civil marriage, but won't give Christian weddings.
That's kind of,
What exactly does that mean?
Good question. I'll get there next. Both the people who have said with a hammer down no to gay marriage, and also the people like, yes, it's life affirming, have both said about this decision, it's moral cowardice and a theological disaster.
You know,
Both sides
the
have said
first controversy about marriage, and this was extremely vigorously debated, was remarriage of divorced
that.
persons, which, you know, even when we were younger, that was, you know, unheard of.
In the Catholic Church, you had to have it annulled.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So you're married for 22 years.
Right.
and
You have a
get
bunch
it
of kids.
annulled, and
Right.
act like it didn't happen.
Yeah. Well, it didn't
Making up
legally
rules.
happen,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
It's
To,
just
to,
another-
to back up your idiot rules to begin with.
Right. It's just another word for divorce, right?
All right, so the question was, what the heck does that mean? So I took this from a Canadian, or a church in Canada, and it was not about, this was not commentary about this ruling. This was published a little bit later. I can give you citations later if you want. But I thought this was really, it actually brought up the problem. So if marriage in the church requires all the criteria of civil marriage, but not all civil marriages qualify as marriage in churches. Blessing civil marriages depends entirely upon the divine purpose and intentions for the blessing. The possibility of blessing without, no, that's up there, without considering it a marriage. Lots of other relationships occur in the human species other than marriage that could be blessed. So what's the difference here? It's a distinctive category that needs a theological rationale. And we need to say, what is the difference between it? So the big question, let's see, these are the big questions. Is God pleased with same-sex unions? Is God pleased with same-sex marriages? And I would argue the Church of England by saying we're going to bless a civil union, but we will not permit marriages of two women in our churches is ignoring the question. As a whole, and the provinces within the Church of England had to answer it for themselves, because that's where you get two. You get some people who will do it in the Church of England and some don't.
While they're busy splitting hairs, how do they define blessing?
It is saying that the church recognizes that the union that these two people have made could have grace poured into it. What's the difference between that and marriage? The church recognizing,
See,
right?
saying you bless it seems to me like, okay, I grew up as a Baptist where I wasn't allowed to dance, and I was asked to go to the prom, and my mother made me a dress, and I said, will you give me your blessing?
Mhm.
And she said, we'll give you our permission, but we cannot give you our blessing.
Thanks, Ma.
Yep. And that's kind of
I
how
need
this
this
feels.
confusion tonight.
Yeah.
This is why she
And
turned out
that's
the
how
way she
this,
did.
yeah.
Yep, that's
Did you
exactly
dance?
how this feels.
What?
Did you dance?
Did you
Of
dance?
course.
You were dancing before you had.
Yep, right. Yeah. So this is where we are. This is our church.
Is
See,
that
somewhere
kinda-
along the line, I learned, this is how I was so confused as a Catholic. Really, because to me, every time something came up that was controversial, they just changed the rule. Seriously. I
Yeah.
mean, we grew up not eating meat on Fridays, and,
Yeah.
you know, and then they say, okay, you can eat meat on Friday. It's like, what about the people in hell on a meat rack? You know, seriously.
Right,
Did
we
they
got
all of a
down there
sudden
because
get
of
out?
citation.
You know,
It's like
what
people
happened?
in prison for marijuana possession.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you
But-
can't eat before communion.
And I,
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
right, right.
It was originally 24 hours, and then they cut it down to 3,
And then one.
then 1. But still, when I was in school, we had to go to church every morning,
Bingo.
but that means you couldn't eat breakfast before school.
That's right.
And they were fine with that. They would rather you go to communion. So then they give a kid a nourishing breakfast after
Right.
walking, you know,
Sure.
3/4 of a
That's
mile
fine
because the
if they-
Catholics
if
couldn't
they-
have buses.
If they give you like an egg McMuffin for communion.
Yeah, something a little more substantial.
But somewhere along the line, I heard this line. It says, "The God of my understanding."
Yeah.
So if God is all forgiving and all loving, where did all these exclusions come from?
Well,
People.
right.
People, and the people aren't the people are they're the congregation. They weren't the church, but the church changed to reflect the congregation.
Right.
Not right.
Maybe,
Well-
but that's also how we got to being open and affirming.
Mhm.
Well,
And I
Right.
think, and I
should have
think,
stopped.
Yeah.
well, I think it depends how you feel about rules. I mean, it's like, if rules aren't good rules, why shouldn't they be changed?
What's the function? Yeah.
And-
My
it's
question
affecting
is, how did
people.
they get to be rules if they weren't good in the first place?
Because,
Because people
Yes.
kowtow to it. They just
but also
fold.
because society and culture has
Right.
changed. I
And-
mean, we're always
Evolving.
moving. We're not,
Well, there
we're
was
not static.
homosexuality back from the beginning of time.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. It just wasn't acknowledged.
Yeah, but who,
Including other species.
but
so
then it was
Yeah.
okay, it
God
was, it was
invented
fine.
homosexuality.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And who declared it bad?
Well, something I can throw in at this point is, having been Episcopalian for what, about 42 years now? Every one of these things was bitterly fought. The women's ordination, and then the gay thing especially, but a number of issues as well. But every one of these was bitterly fought. I remember when Bishop of Iowa, I think, had ordained a gay priest, and all hell was rained down on him at the national church. And then eventually, it was women ordination. First, women just got ordained irregularly. They
Right.
didn't use the normal procedure for marrying. And because the church wouldn't have it.
Yeah.
The Episcopal Church was a lot more rigid in the past than it is now. I
absolutely.
mean, like in the time we've been Episcopalians.
And I used to watch nuns do everything on the altar that a priest did, almost.
Right.
Yeah,
And it was amazing. I picked this up as a kid. And I remember talking about it, but if a priest touched the host, he had to keep his fingers together.
mm-hmm,
You know, for,
a blessed host.
I don't know, yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
for what period of time.
Until
For how
until
long?
communion concluded and he was
Yeah.
able to wash his hand
Right.
after.
But a nun could handle them all when she was done, and nothing.
Right.
But the ones that were blessed host, like that were consecrated, she could pick up those and move those around?
Yeah,
Okay.
after communion was over and there was leftovers,
Yeah,
you know, there was more in the
Mhm.
cup.
so she like physically picked
Yeah.
up the individual.
And
not
drop
just
one
the-
on the floor?
Yeah.
Oh my.
Yeah. I
Alright.
still do cringe when I see that. I'm like, so there's so much stuff. So we mentioned like laws and like not eating before the liturgy. Clearly I did today. You saw me shove something in my mouth. But I think that there's a lot to be said about allowing spiritual practices, while not making it necessary for all the faithful.
Right.
So there's some of that. It's like, stop making it a law. If you want to do this and these are your standards, good. If you think that it's actually bringing some spiritual nourishment to yourself, like I like it when I have a little bit of discipline, because I'm a very sloppy, lazy, indulgent person. So if I can actually make some kind of fast, then I'm proud of myself. So we're not going to get through all of this, but we'll get into a chunk of this. The Book of Common Prayer. This is for lay and ordained people to use. It's for Sunday and every day. It's for people who are actual normal people and people who are super nerdy. It's modern and ancient.
Liturgy geek is the word I coined for people
I
who
like
are, for people
Yep.
who are super nerdy about liturgy stuff.
That's great.
I am so stealing that.
That's, I like it. So we mentioned
Just kinda
before.
describe Josh in a little bit.
Yeah. We mentioned before kind of under the desired bonds of unity or affection are common scripture and experience, church unity. So we've got the little bit in here. This is from the 1789 ratification, but this is also, let's see, do hereby establish the said book. And they declare it to be the liturgy of this church and require that it be received as such by all members of the same. So there had to actually be legislation for the Book of Common Prayer in its earliest forms. We might get a little bit to that, to be accepted by all the churches that were incorporated into the Anglican Communion. This was the book. We'll also get into, we might not get into, but all the different types of books that were that influenced putting together this one monograph.
And this statement speaks to what you asked about, Marcy, earlier, is that was 1789, and it was called the Protestant Episcopal Church in the United States.
Yep.
So it was really happening at the same time that the US Constitution was being formed.
Yeah, 12 years.
up until that point, well, really up until the revolution, these were Church of England parishes.
We didn't have bishops. Yep. So this is kind of a breakup of what's going on in there. So you can really see it's got just everything that you could work with. This is a picture here. Part of the there are a bunch of historical documents in the BCP. First one was 1549. And a big part that we still have in the liturgy, but we might not have like awareness of, is the Psalter. Psalms have always been a central piece of Christian liturgy, all the way back to the early church, and it still is in almost all Christian traditions. So this one actually mentions it right up front. And most BCPs will have the Psalms twice. One is by Coverdale, who's a very literary, poetic author, and that oftentimes that's the one that'll be used in liturgies. And then there's the Psalms that we get just in the Bible proper. So if you have a BCP that has a Bible instead of a hymnal, you'll have the Psalter, the Psalms twice. This is one of my favorite quotes. The BCP's fans are most at fault, claiming stately majesty for its prose instead of the original urgency and nervous energy, preserving the past in amber, quieting controversies, thereby consigning it to point dustiness. So that's kind of funny. I had met a couple of people who did not like the BCP because like, oh, that's stuffy and that's ugh. And I'm like, this is amazing. So this is the pitfall. People who can love liturgy and rites and high church can just come like, no, we've already decided this. This has been eternal. This is ordained. We can't move from this. Cranmer and Henry VIII, kind of the two biggest people known. These are my main sources. These are my favorite. Alan Jacobs did a little book called The Book of Common Prayer, a biography. There's a series from Yale. I highly recommend this little series. It's only like 300 pages. The other books, on the other hand, are big tomes. You drop on your toe, you have to go to the emergency room. The Book of Common Prayer, that Cummings one, has a fantastic introduction, and it has the text of the 1549, 59, and 62 prayer books. So you can look to see what the differences were.
You are a wild man. You just live large and do crazy things.
Yeah, look at me. Right? I take full credit for this meme. I am super proud of it. What do you mean separation of church and state? And apparently that was one of his monkeys that he did own. And then he had it stuffed. So.
Don't you think David also looks a little bit like King Henry?
I could see why you'd say that.
Thou dost cast thyself into damnation with thine words and oath breaking. So
That's it.
yep.
David from now on.
So he's king for. This is the head of your church. It became the head of your church because of all of his divorces, and he killed almost all of his wives. So like that definitely happened then. I would argue that the annulments were pretty much just the perfect reason for him to break from papal jurisdiction.
And he really didn't like the idea of some foreign prince, the Pope, dictating what happened in the United Kingdom or England.
Right. Because all those Roman Catholic subjects, including him, were religiously and politically subject to the Roman Pontiff. And if you look at maps during this time, like the difference between secular and ecclesial land masses and geographic political boundaries, Pope's got a lot of real estate over here. So one could argue that this was just the occasion. He wanted something he couldn't get, and he's like, all right, this is the 10th thing I've wanted and I couldn't get, so I'm gonna do it with this.
Well, everyone should see Six the Musical, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
haven't heard
yeah, the six wives of Henry VIII tell their story instead of just letting him tell it. Yeah, Catherine of Aragon was,
Yeah.
she didn't want a divorce.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like that would make me too angry,
Oh, yeah.
and I don't want to.
Watching it, I see.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, I mean, it's empowering. It's
Really?
Well, yeah, it's girl power. It's, yeah, taking back their stories.
Remember,
I guess, but the end result,
I mean, well, this is after he's broken up with all of them, sometimes in very irreversible ways, and
right.
and
What's the problem? What do you
and
do with
so-
your exes?
and so
you know?
so they're all like back from the dead, and the whole point is they're going to see which one of them had it worst, and then they decide, well, why are we fighting over who's the biggest victim when we should be uniting as sisters? And okay, so I just spoiled it, but watch it anyway.
That would make me watch it more.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
I like that.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the truth is just too infuriating.
Yeah.
Did anybody see that Netflix series for a while, House of Medici?
not House of Medici. I watched the one with Jeremy Irons. Which is
Dustin
also-
Hoffman?
No. Well, there's another one.
About how much control the Pope and the banks had over
Yeah.
the Church of England and everything else.
Yeah, so this is a big deal right here, the act of supremacy. Seizure of monastic land into royal land, not just, okay, we can sell it for people, private enterprise, but then all it becomes royal
That's what we
estates
did in India.
with royal. Yes, and that was like a combination of both like privatized land, but then federal seizure of assets. This was a straight up, oh, that was church land? It's still church land, but everything's controlled by the state. This is the thing I don't like about him, is a big destruction of shrines. The supreme head on earth of the Church of England. The act of supremacy.
Is the monarch still is?
Yeah, isn't it a like governing head or something? Like they
Yeah,
changed
something
the
like
term.
that, yeah.
Yeah.
That on earth is like really like putting, seems like they want to emphasize like where,
The earth.
yeah.
Uh-huh. Right, so now you kind of have a battle. So it might be the church in England, but also it says on earth. And what is the British Empire doing? It's divine right of expansion. So now you have the papal supremacy, right? So war go for the Pope at the time, or war was a no-go for the Pope at the time. He had some other issues. He had internal squabbling he had to work on. He didn't have a lot of money. So he just excommunicated all of England, because once you excommunicate a monarch, that includes all of your subjects. And it frees said subjects to open rebellion for the sake of reunion with the faithful flock of the church.
So instead of declaring war, the Pope just hoped that enough people would basically go to war on the church's
Yeah.
behalf without him having to get it started.
Assassination? Yeah, you're fine. You're back. You come back to your proper standing. Yeah, using.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Think of Hamilton, you don't need that.
Faithful will be bound. Okay, that's what
Yep.
you were saying,
Yep.
right? Lindsay?
Yeah,
Faithful
yeah,
will
I mean,
be
that's-
bound.
So this is the biggest, funniest part that it's hard for me to comprehend. There weren't significant changes until after Henry, aside from the seizure, aside from seizures and dissolution of monasteries and divine right
Destruction of
theology.
statues.
Right, yeah. But the stuff they did in churches didn't really change. And it was under Edward. He was 15 years old that the first BCP came out. And his mom was Seymour.
Yeah, she died shortly after this.
Okay.
I saw that something
I just saw her in a TV
Yeah.
show.
Yeah. So here's the
Oh, you
guy
think there's
that
another
has
James?
stuck a whole bunch of things together. There's a fog of mystery around his procedures and whatever councils he had and the scholarship and everything. We have to kind of go back and kind of do some deconstruction and historical supposition about stuff. So you can see some Lutheran ideas. You can see later he married a Reformed girl, I think. So then he had some more Reformed as opposed to evangelical Lutheran influence. And yeah, so he's very politically involved,
Now, who is this again?
Cranmer.
Oh, okay.
Can't you tell by his Roche and Chimera?
Yeah, come on, look at him. Yep.
Josh and I just have a little club, you know?
Nerds. Yeah, so it didn't go so well for him. And Mary, and I didn't put this on here, Mary was after Edward. She was the monarch, and she tried to pull everybody back into Rome's throne. Mhm. So bring England back under Roman jurisdiction.
In Oxford, or Oxford, there's a monument right in the road, kind of a Gothic spire, where the English martyrs were burned by Mary Wollstonecraft.
Was she the daughter of Henry and Catherine of Aragon?
I'd have to look.
Okay.
I'm gonna get all my names and all my
Okay.
succession mixed
Okay,
up right
just
now.
trying to, I mean,
Yeah.
because that would explain her connection to Catholicism.
Right, yes,
So
it was
I
that, yeah.
wonder, I mean,
Yeah.
and somehow she had royal succession. So
Right, yes,
Yeah.
yes, so she was one of Henry's.
Yeah.
So again, remember that one of the first slides, ooh, come back, where we saw that it was the snippet from the front of the BCP.
Mhm.
This is where Parliament, so 49, this is the Parliament declared the BCP the common prayer book of the English Dominion.
Interestingly enough, if they want to change the prayer book again, Parliament still has to approve
Yeah, yeah.
it, which is weird.
Much of this was business,
Go on. What do you mean?
for money,
Oh,
all of them. The power was for the money.
yeah, but yes, but also what's not? Sure, I think that they had.
Well,
I think they had
There's
spiritual,
a lot of stuff that
theological
is, but they tell
conviction.
them it's for the money. This,
Yeah.
they tell you it's not.
It might be so.
This
So
was
again,
all
like
power
the
grabbing.
difference between, like, there's no separation of church and state, and at this time, a lot of the Reformation were arguments, and other Reformations within the Roman Church or within Christendom were arguments about how much spirituality and like authentic theological conviction was different from commercial or economic enterprise. So somebody arguing that we need a new BCP to hold people together to create a spiritual unity, they'd say, yes, and we have to keep everybody together to keep money flowing to support the clergy and to maintain the armies that defend the borders, right? So there's no parsing out this, like, is this authentic or is this only a power grab? It's like, it's both. I don't know how to split the difference.
Right.
Yeah,
More of a power grab and then back it up with the
could be, right? I think that happens a lot. Yep. So these are some of the big things that were found in his study. The Sarum Rite, which is a different liturgy, a breviary. Oh, of what? Oh,
Right in here.
right?
Man Hall.
Yeah,
Probably.
Man Hall. but-
Why don't you put it on this
Yeah.
table right here?
Lois, actually, it should go to Man Hall. Lois Sheridan should be waiting for it. I don't know where she is though.
So, but yeah, so
Yeah,
the
but-
the liturgy is still going, so we can't walk through the nave yet.
Yeah, we can't.
Oh, okay, never mind. Put it in, yeah,
Oh,
put it
good.
in there.
Yep,
Put it on the table.
that's all right.
Should be almost
Yeah.
done, right?
Yeah,
They're singing
So
the.
what's a breviary?
Right.
a breviary, that would be a more personal use that doesn't have group liturgy, that has prayers, and it has a year-long, ironically, breviary, brief, not, year-long selection of scripture readings, prayers, and collects.
So it kind of follows calendar.
It
It's like a
does.
Calendar.
It does. So these are some of the, also, you never hear about these. These are some of the things that influence them. Laura, I'm just gonna talk until you kick me off, because I'm having fun.
You got 2 more minutes.
Okay. So yes, lots of old stuff went into influencing our BCP that we have now. We have the canons from 1006. We have constitutions from 1300. This is how his was broken up, but this is a list that I got from one of my sources of things that probably were used gospel books, missals, ordinals, psalters, legends, antiphoner, which is music. Salisbury Cathedral followed the greater part of England. And that a lot of things kind of flew
The
out
Sarum
of,
use, as we say.
yeah. Salisbury, Sarum, yeah. This is another list of. So we won't go much into Elizabeth, but I have extreme awe, reverence, and a good amount of fear of her. She was one of the longest reigning monarchs. I think our Elizabeth II surpassed her. Yeah. Geneva Bible. So one of the most important things, we have the Act of Supremacy and Uniformity. This was an art, is it the next thing? So she, under her were 39 articles, which we consider historical, non-binding
Thank goodness.
information.
Yeah, there's
Yep.
one more.
On theology and practice. And then she kind of helped hold together the more extreme Puritan versions of the church, some of the old Roman Catholic factions that just wanted to not be hanged, and some of the various Lutherans and Reformed polity and theology changes. She kind of brought this all together. And it was a big scandal that some people heard that she had a crucifix in her private chapel. Because no good Protestant would have that. That's way too papish. So, yeah.
And on that note, I need to
Perfect.
I need to
That's good.
shut it down and go to the church.
Yep.
Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.